Welcome to the Front 7 podcast right here on YouTube. I am your host, Money Mike, and today on the Front 7 podcast, I will be discussing head coaches who very well could be fired at the end of the year. Now, I know tomorrow is only week 4, and by the end of week 4, we'll only be a quarter of the way through. But here's the thing. The NFL plays in London tomorrow morning that starts at 9:30 a.m. with the Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for the past 2 years, they've started their London stuff in October. Each time, the last 2 years, we have seen a head coach get fired. In 2014, after a loss to the Dolphins, Raiders head coach Dennis Allen was fired after his game in London. Last year, we saw Joe Philbin, the Dolphins head coach, after they lost to the Jets. He got fired after their London game last year. And now we look this year, and this is where I'm going to start here with the head coaching carousel of sorts. Gus Bradley and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, this was a team that was hyped up all off season. They went out, they got Malik Jackson, they paid for these big-time free agents, they got Tishawn Gibson from Cleveland. This was supposed to have been a team that was going to take the next step. They were finally going to be a team that would be able to take advantage of the fact that the AFC South is a very, and I guess I should say still is a weak division in the NFL. And it might be the worst division in football now that the NFC East is now very, very competitive over in the NFC. So now the AFC South has basically taken over as the weakest division in football. And last year, we were worried, I think a lot of people were worried, oh no, we're going to have a under 500 division winner. Because at some point during the season last year, that's where it was heading. That's how bad the division was. And so Jacksonville basically had a chance to win. And they couldn't take advantage of it. So they go out and make these changes. They bring in some new guys, and specifically Malik Jackson. That move got Jacksonville a lot of hype, which is pretty much where it started, I believe, because Malik Jackson was key to the Denver defense. So a lot of people thought, oh, going to Jacksonville, he's going to improve their defense. He's going to bring a championship mentality to Jacksonville. And so far through 3 weeks, has anybody seen the impact Malik Jackson has done in Jacksonville? Malik Jackson signs with Jacksonville. They're 0-3. John Elway, as you know, any team that wins the Super Bowl knows you can't pay everybody. And John Elway decided to pay Derek Wolfe and allowed Malik Jackson to walk. That defense is built to win and pretty much help any quarterback, whoever it may be. So Trevor Siemian now has the Broncos at 3-0, even though he hasn't fared that well, but he did have a nice coming out party last week against Cincinnati, who won on Thursday night, I should say, against the Miami Dolphins. And after Thursday, I might talk a little bit about Adam Gase, maybe being one and done a little bit later on. But the Denver defense has not missed a beat. Trevor Siemian has done everything that Denver has asked him to do. They're 3-0. Their defense has not missed Malik Jackson. And he was just another piece to that defense that's interchangeable. Teams can go in there and just plug and play whoever they want and not miss a beat. But that also says a lot about Wade Phillips. And we know Wade Phillips, he's not a good head coach, but he's a great defensive coordinator. That might be some good advice for Rex Ryan that I'll have in a little bit. But the Denver defense has not missed Malik Jackson at all. They're 3-0. They're still the same defense that pretty much has picked off where they left off at the end of the Super Bowl. So they have not missed a beat. They're 0-3, Denver's 3-0, and you see who won that deal. So despite all these additions, Gus Bradley was supposed to finally have this team ready to compete. They are built to basically be a good team, but they just, for some reason, they cannot improve under Gus Bradley. I don't know why. I almost liken this situation to the 49ers before Jim Harbaugh. The 49ers had all this great talent on their team, and they just went through head coaches and general managers where it was like there's nobody that can take advantage of the talent that they have. I mean, it was clear as day that they were talented. And Jim Harbaugh brings them to 3 NFC Championships games, a Super Bowl appearance, and then got run out of town for no reason whatsoever. And by the way, San Francisco is on their second head coach since they fired Jim Harbaugh. And so Jim Harbaugh came in and was able to take advantage of the talent the 49ers had, and he made them a real legit Super Bowl contender. And I feel Jacksonville, that's what they need. They need to find their own Jim Harbaugh, that a coach can come in and take advantage of the talent that they have and bring them into a contending team. Truly, I really think that the London head coaching curse is going to swallow up Gus Bradley, just like it did with Dennis Allen and Joe Philbin before him. You do kind of wonder how he's been able to keep his job. Before the season, he had a 12-36 record as a head coach, but yet the Jacksonville Jaguars gave him a 1-year extension through 2017. And this is what General Manager Dave Caldwell said at that time. For an organization that we believe is ready to make its move, extending Gus through the 2017 season provides our club with much-needed stability in every respect, Dave Caldwell said. It solidifies Gus's good standing with our current players, provides certainty for free agents, and helps to deliver the continuity throughout our coaching staff that we think is critical for us to turn the corner. It also gives us the best opportunity to win in 2016. Well, right now, that winning part is not happening. He got an extension last year, back in January, but now he may only see 4 games of the 2016 season. Now, moving right along to Buffalo, they pretty much started this, right? They started this coaching carousel. They fired offensive coordinator Greg Roman, but in reality, what makes it interesting is why didn't they fire Rex Ryan? When they brought in his brother Rob, that was pretty much a circus of its own. But, for me, what I feel like Gus Bradley, to me, he's simply not just a head coach. Rex Ryan is better suited as a defensive coordinator, rather a head coach. And what makes it even more worse than this is that Doug Marrone had the Buffalo Bills at 9-7, 1 game out of the playoffs when they fired him. But yet, they have declined under Rex Ryan. So how can Doug Marrone, who, by the way, is in Jacksonville, and most likely will take over as the interim head coach after Gus Bradley gets fired this week, how can Doug Marrone have the Bills ready to be in the playoffs, 1 game out of the playoffs, get fired, and then the team declines under Rex Ryan? Once again, folks, I think what we are seeing is coaching is so important to a team's success. And it's just one of those things where it's mind-boggling how coaches get fired for, if I really want to put it in a sense, if I could quote Chris Carter once talked about a fall guy. Well, Greg Roman was Rex Ryan's fall guy. And yes, they beat the Arizona Cardinals, but something is wrong with the Cardinals, okay? Don't look too much into that win that the Bills had. Now, I may be wrong. Maybe they needed a change in the offensive coordinator. I don't know. We'll see how they do against the Patriots on Sunday. And it would be wise for Buffalo to move on and bring in somebody else, in which, if you read the reports, there's reports that they had met with Tom Coughlin. And it's amazing that there's even reports about it. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's just a report, a rumor. Well, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So there must have been some contact between the Bills and Tom Coughlin in order for this to come out and for it to leak. Yeah, it's easy to make up a rumor and say that, hey, they met with Tom Coughlin, whatever. But to me, that tells me that the Bills ownership is not happy with Rex and that they are looking for a better coach. And I personally think that's what's going to happen. So he'll survive the season, but he'll be fired on Black Monday. And after Thursday's game between the Dolphins and the Bengals, I have to say, I have to throw in Adam Gase. Just like Rex Ryan, and I think Gus Bradley is going to fall into this category along with Wade Phillips. There are coaches that are great coordinators, but they are terrible head coaches. And, okay, yeah, I know it's judging somebody off of only 4 games his first year, but, the way they played against the Bengals on Thursday, it's amazing to me, actually, how they actually only held A.J. Green to 10 receptions and only 1 touchdown. That's the amazing thing, considering it should have really been a 40-7 blowout win. But yet the Dolphins defense came up big, and after the A.J. Green touchdown, held the Bengals to 5 field goals. And the Dolphins, they just could not do anything with their opportunities. Ryan Tannehill is going to become David Carr. I believe the statistic that NFL Network showed was that he's been sacked, I think, 190 sometimes. That was going into the game last night. He's been sacked 190 times, or 190 something. I can't remember what the number is, which is the most in the NFL. Now, they went out, they drafted Laramie Tunsil. He fell to them after the whole Bong video that came out. But then again, you see how Ronnie Stanley's doing, and you see Tunsil couldn't even block and keep Tannehill upright. The Ravens made the right decision, as always, because Ozzie Newsome is the second best general manager in football. Bill Belichick, number 1. The Dolphins' offensive line could not block for their life. Ryan Tannehill was pressured, and it seemed like when the Dolphins had something going on, there would be penalties. They barely beat the Cleveland Browns. Dolphins are a bad team. And honestly, this kind of reminds me of the Dolphins when they had Cam Cameron as the head coach for 1 year. And I really think Adam Gase might suffer a very similar fate to Cam Cameron and last only 1 year in Miami before the Dolphins bring in somebody else and restart over again. It could very well be 2 new head coaches in the AFC East next year. Adam Gase could be one and done, especially if the Dolphins continue to perform so terrible on the field. If Thursday was any indication, the rest of their season doesn't look promising at all. And same thing for the Bills. They just put Sammy Watkins on IR, in which we can officially call that a bad trade. Now let's move to the NFC here real quick, because I will get back to the AFC in a little bit. The NFC to me is very interesting because right now what I see is Sean Payton and Drew Brees are on their last legs in New Orleans. Now I know there's going to be that loyalty to keep them, and they gave Drew Brees an extension, but let's be honest here. It's time for New Orleans to blow this up and restart over. Trade Drew Brees to a team next year, get some draft picks for him, blow the team up, similar to when they brought in Drew Brees and Sean Payton in 2006. Blow the team up, start all over again, and you start from scratch. You clear the cap space from Drew Brees. You can now bring players in. You can trade some guys, try to get some more draft picks. To me, the Saints cannot afford an 0-4 start. I don't think they would fire Sean Payton if the Saints go 0-4, but it might be possible. Just saying. There might be loyalty there, and I know Drew Brees signed a 2-year extension, and right now, the NFC South looks wide open to me. It's one of those surprising wide open divisions. I really thought there was nobody really could compete with Carolina. But Carolina has their own issues. And it looks like Atlanta is going to be in good position to take advantage of it, while New Orleans is still not ready to compete yet. And to me, starting over would be the best thing for the Saints, whether they fire Sean Payton in the middle of the season or even at the end of the season. But starting over is probably the best thing to do for the Saints at the moment. They've missed the playoffs the last couple of years. They've been on a decline since they won the Super Bowl in 2009. It was almost like that was their peak, and then they just tumbled afterwards. And now for the Saints, they've got to start looking forward. Maybe a house cleaning. You fire general manager Mickey Loomis. The Chicago Bears. Now this is interesting to me. I really thought the Bears would actually be a good team. Well, okay, I don't want to say good team, but I thought they would be a lot competitive this year. Maybe 7-9, 8-8. Maybe even make a run at a wild card spot. Because I thought they were going to be an improved team with a defense. And I thought, you know what, maybe Jay Cutler won't suck. But he's injured. They've now turned to Brian Hoyer. And to me, you know, another thing you have to look at is John Fox. Is he going to be 2-done in Chicago? I mean, the Bears so far, I mean, it looks like they really don't have any improvement under John Fox so far. I mean, they're 0-3, looking at 0-4 tomorrow. But when you look at their losses, you sit there and you wonder, you know what? Again, John Elway outsmarted everybody, fired John Fox, and he brought in Gary Kubiak. They go out and win the Super Bowl last year in Kubiak's first year as head coach. Apparently, John Elway knows what he's doing as a front office guy. He got Jacksonville to pay a bunch of money to Malik Jackson, and their defense hasn't missed a beat. And then brought in Gary Kubiak, and they won a Super Bowl in his first year as head coach, when everybody was questioning why they let John Fox go. And a lot of people thought, oh, John Fox was wrongly fired in Denver, and then they thought, you know, he'd be good in Chicago, but now Chicago's not that good. And Bears general manager Ryan Pace, I think at this point, needs to start looking at the quarterbacks for next year, and I think that would be the best way to go. They've long needed a franchise quarterback. Jay Cutler is not that quarterback. They will be able to start over if, again, their season continues the way it's going. They're going to be in position to draft a quarterback early in the first round next year, potentially with a top 5, top 10 pick. Staying in the NFC here, and I will get back to the AFC here, as I do want to discuss a couple more teams. I will discuss the Cleveland Browns in a completely separate podcast, because I want, especially after tomorrow, if they go to 0-4, I want to talk about their history. I mean, they're pretty much like cursed. Like, they've been cursed since 1999. They just cannot have any luck go their way. And, I mean, you talk about bad luck. I mean, they got Tom Brady in his first game back from suspension next week. I mean, you talk about bad luck. I mean, that's bad luck right there. I mean, for what that team has gone through since 1999, it's unbelievable. And I will discuss that in a separate show next week. But as for now, I want to look at the Washington Redskins, who the Cleveland Browns face on Sunday. Now, to me, I think, yes, they beat the Giants. But they were 0-2 before that. And their schedule is pretty rough. They got the AFC North. They have a first place schedule, and I really think that's not going to work in their favor. And I think at this point, if you consider the cycle that Dan Snyder goes on, it's actually time for Dan Snyder to bring in a big name head coach. Because it does seem, because if you look at the Redskins coaching history, especially as of late, Dan Snyder, he goes for the young up-and-coming coordinator and then fires them if they don't do well. Then he brings in a big-name head coach and then fire him. And then they go for the young up-and-coming coordinator again, and that was Jay Gruden. Well, I think right now I would pretty much say I think Jay Gruden is going to be on the hot seat. Kirk Cousins is on the 1-year franchise tag, so he's going to be going after next year, and he's not done anything to show that he deserves a big contract for next year by any team, let alone Washington. And if you look, I mentioned Tom Coughlin earlier. As I said, the cycle that Dan Snyder goes on, it's quite possible you could throw Tom Coughlin's name in the hat for the Washington Redskins if the Redskins miss the playoffs and have a bad season, because Tom Coughlin is that big name head coach that Dan Snyder loves to see or loves to sign. Just like he went and signed Josh Norman to a big contract. This is just typical Dan Snyder. And for Jay Gruden, he's done a good job. You know, he made the right decision last year to go with Kirk Cousins over RG3. I mean, if they went with RG3, I don't think they win the division last year. And you see where RG3 is right now. He is injured. Kirk Cousins, meanwhile, he's not worthy of a big contract, but I will tell you, at least a losing season would allow Washington to kind of do what Cincinnati did last year, or in 2011, where they can actually go out and get a quarterback that Jay Gruden can develop the same way he helped develop Andy Dalton for the Cincinnati Bengals. And that is going to be the key. Unless, of course, as I said, Dan Snyder goes for the big name and he goes after a Tom Coughlin, a John Gruden, and brings them in because of the name value. He's going to be one to watch as the season progresses through to see what happens to him. And then you have the Detroit Lions. How they kept Jim Caldwell, I'm very surprised at that. They're 1-2. They only have beaten the Colts so far. They gave up 4 touchdowns to Aaron Rodgers last week, and because of the Packers defense being terrible and just as bad, they were able to almost mount a comeback, I should say. But playing Chicago with who's starting Brian Hoyer quarterback, they'll go to 2-2, and I think Jim Caldwell, very same way. I think Detroit needs to bring in somebody that can take them to the next level. I know they kept Jim Caldwell this year, but I mean, with the losing season, if the Lions were to have a losing season, I just can't see Jim Caldwell hanging around going forward or into next year. I would actually be shocked if the Lions had a losing season and he actually was coaching the Detroit Lions next year. But hey, maybe Detroit will just start out 0-3 next year and be, week 4, go to London, boom, fire Jim Caldwell after London. But for the Tennessee Titans, I've been impressed with them. They've played very well. They played a very good game against Oakland last week. They played a good game against Detroit, who they beat. They also actually fared quite well against Minnesota before the Vikings defense took over with the interceptions. I mean, that was a really close game. I knew with Sean Hill being the starter that yes, it would be close, and the Titans would probably be in a good position to upset them in week 1. And Titans came close to doing that. So the Titans are playing well. Mike Mularkey, he's done a good job actually, surprisingly. But to me, the Titans, they're not going to be able to take the next step without bringing in a better coach. Tennessee, they had a great offseason. They were able to rob the Rams of a bunch of picks for a third-string quarterback, and then they used those picks to turn them into great talent on the field. You bring in Jack Conklin, the offensive tackle from Michigan. They drafted Derrick Henry. They've added Kevin Dodd. I mean, they've added great players on that team through the draft, and they're only going to get better. You do have to give him credit for the job he's done. So there's actually a good chance that he actually makes it to next year if the Titans stay this competitive. So that will do it, as I have discussed a very early Week 4 Coaching Carousel. We will see what happens on Monday, whether or not London will swallow up another head coach in Gus Bradley. Does he get fired if the Colts win and the Jaguars lose in London and suffer the same fate that Dennis Allen and Joe Philbin suffered the past 2 years? Who else will be on track to be fired throughout the year? As I said before, all of this makes up the story of the 2016 season, and it's going to be a great story to watch as we turn the page to week number 4 tomorrow, starting at 9:30 a.m. with the Colts and the Jaguars in London. I will have a complete show on the Cleveland Browns because, like I said, that's an entire show of itself, just how cursed and just how much bad luck they have had since they returned to the league in 1999. And whether or not I am here next week talking about Gus Bradley being fired, maybe John Fox, maybe Rex Ryan after they lose to the Patriots' backup quarterbacks. Who knows? Maybe Sean Payton is fired. It's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds tomorrow as we look ahead to week number 4. I've been your host, Money Mike. Comment below. Tell me what you think of the head coaches that are on their way to be fired. Did I miss anybody? Maybe I did. Maybe I missed a coach that's under the radar type of deal that you think that I should have brought up. Comment below on that. Make sure you subscribe going forward as I will be discussing all of the NFL as it unfolds throughout the 2016 season. Some new Everything Else podcasts will be coming up as well. Once again, I've been your host, Money Mike. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the games tomorrow. Enjoy the college football games today. And I will see you next week right here on the Front 7 podcast.